Welcome to Sell Like You, the ultimate sales podcast that will teach you how to make sales your superpower, transform your mindset, and in doing so, explode your sales beyond your wildest dreams. I'm Harriet Meller, and over the last 17 years, I've helped hundreds of top companies around the world, including my own, make more money and qualify more leads using simple strategies that work. In this podcast, you'll learn how I generated over 10 million in annual sales, along with the sales techniques, processes, and tools that will work for you to generate more dream-aligned clients and scale your business beyond what you thought was possible. If you're sick of the boring, outdated, and pushy sales tactics of the past, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. As a reseller or integrator, you're effectively partnering with vendors to provide your ideal clients with a solution, solve a problem, deliver an outcome. And whether you are providing managed services tied into that or solution-based services, vendors need to be at the core of your sales strategy. Now, during the 15 years that I sold with vendors in partnership with, were some of the best years for me because I was really able to go in, work with specific organizations, and then pull in the right people, the right knowledge, the right expertise, the right solutions, and become that trusted advisor. Now, that was ultimately the goal, to become that trusted advisor, but you need to align with the right vendors, build the right relationships to do that. Now, I've pulled together a list of 10 ways that you can build better relationships with your vendors to grow sales, to grow collaborative opportunities, to increase the volume of deal registrations that you can put through these systems. Now, firstly, you need to understand their product and their services and what that actually means to your customers. Now, if I take you back to when I was doing that, was that what I'd seen when going to market was that we'd have this page upon page upon page of PowerPoint presentations of technology and bits and bytes and speeds and feeds and diagrams and all these things that link back to what the technology did or how it did it. When actually the customer, the end user, unless you were dealing with somebody technical, which in my experience, I was generally dealing with decision makers, directors, strategists, CFOs, CEOs, to really design a solution that delivers an outcome. They don't want to know the bits and the nuts and the bolts that go into this solution. They want to know how it's going to impact their business, how it's going to stop them from being a target in a cyber attack, how it's going to help them sleep at night, how it's going to reduce any risks within their business. And so often they don't really care about how that's done. But when it comes down to the technical capabilities, that's when you bring in these really smart, clever people to really then deliver that solution and explain how that's going to work and design the implementation and then hand it over with incredible documentation. So understanding products and services is really key. If you don't understand the entire suite, there's no way you're going to be able to go to market. If you do attempt to go to market and you don't know enough and you're just taking the technical information, technical jargon to market, you're not going to see as much success because you're not able to explain it. Now, I was on a coaching call recently and I got asked about how do we have those aha moments in a boardroom? And essentially what it drilled down to or boiled down to was that the conversation was really leaning towards the fact that the explanation of the solution wasn't hitting home. The explanation of how they could have an impact just wasn't resonating, it wasn't connecting. Now, that's got nothing to do with the technology itself or about whether it can actually do the job, but it's about down to the salesperson and whether you have the understanding to be able to explain it in multiple different ways, meaning you truly understand what it can actually deliver. And so I always give recommendations around how to learn, and we have a learning framework which we take our clients through, but essentially you should be able to describe the product or service outcomes, problems it overcomes, and the types of industries that it has the biggest impact in, which resonates with your mum, your brother, your friend. It also needs to resonate with a C-level, with somebody that's driving strategy, that's driving outcomes. And then also then be able to explain it to a point where you can then bring in somebody else to have a really robust technical conversation. And so when we look at our position as a salesperson in that integrator role, is we're sitting at the center of the conversation. And our job is to pull in the relevant people. I don't need to know everything about every product, every service, every vendor, every distributor, every opportunity or use case, but I have to know enough to showcase value, to showcase expertise, to show that give me an opportunity because I know what I'm talking about. And that comes with experience. It comes with stories and examples. But then when you bring in these experts and your technical team, they add value to the conversation and show that you will pull in relevant people when it's required. And you become the go-to. You become that valued thought leader, that valued connection that they know they can go to when they need something, and you will be honest upfront and then refer them into the right people to speak to. And so number 2 in our 10 ways to build better relationships with vendors is to build a relationship. Firstly, build a relationship. Call them regularly. Share what you know. Share what you're seeing in calls. Share what you're seeing in meetings and conversations, whether it's specific to industries, whether it's something you've not understood, because it's also the vendor's responsibility to ensure you have that level of understanding, which we've just mentioned earlier. And so ask the questions that are in your head. Get clear on the information that's going to help you have robust conversations, and then find out what they're seeing. What are they seeing in their conversations, in their other partners' conversations, in certain industries? Who's selling the most of that service, of that product offering? Why? How are they doing it? How are they positioning it? What case studies are having the biggest impact? What story or news article are we relating it back to? And so when we have those conversations, I call them car chats. I used to do this every single morning. I would be driving to the office. We had the benefit of being 2 hours behind in the time zone. So I'd leave for the office early. I'd spend 40 minutes driving to work. And during that time, I'd ring my vendors. I would have a conversation with them. I'd do exactly this. I'd ask the questions. I'd share what I'm seeing. I'd ask what they're seeing. And so what it allows you to do is build relationships, but learn from one another, and then allow you to then elevate the results. Because if you build block on top of one another and to be able to achieve great insights and be able to learn from one another, you're both going to be more successful. And that's what a partnership or a true partnership means and what it looks like. And so to build that relationship, you have to find a way that makes sense to you, that aligns with you, the way that you work. But by having a methodology where you've got, or a structure, I should say, where you know when you are going to be reaching out to them, when you're going to call them, when you're going to check in, so that you don't leave it too long, because you need to remain front of mind to be able to be relevant in their world, in opportunities that they're seeing as well. And so when we look at point number 3, which is who are their top partners, who are their top resellers, what makes them top, what makes them a priority? Now, a bit of insight here, as I'm sure you already know this, or would at least guess it, is that the top priority or the top tier partners in a vendor are based on the accreditations in line with the revenue that's being generated. Now, often you'll see national or global suppliers or integrators, which will end up being a tier 1 partner. Now, that's great. They will provide, large volume opportunities, but they may not necessarily be driving volume of repeatable opportunities. It might be 1 a quarter, but that's enough to make them top. And so within those ones, maybe underneath, let's take out those global players or national players for a moment. And what about everybody else underneath? Where do they sit? Where do your tier 2 start? And where do you fit? And because when you know where you fit into this ranking or in this scoring mechanism, it means that you know what you need to do to become relevant, to become a priority. Or you then need to ask the question if you can't quite see it, or if you can see it, maybe just clarify it. And so something I was taught very early on, which was a great question a guy I used to work for, and he used to ask a question, and I was really thrown off when I first heard it, which was, how do you get paid? And so when we find out how they're getting paid, what their structure is, what they care about, for them it might be volume of opportunities, volume of leads, volume of deal registrations. It might be total sale. It might be net new logos versus resell opportunities. So when you find that out, you can not only then link that back into how we can build better relationships and drive more opportunity, but we can then also then tie that into then, okay, well, to achieve that target, who in your reseller or partner base at the moment is driving that? How do I become somebody that you care about? How do I become someone that is a priority in your day-to-day, in your week-to-week? Because that's where I want to be. Now, you can't do that with every vendor. It's just not feasible. For me, I've worked anywhere between 20 to 40 vendor partnerships, and it takes a lot to manage that. And you wouldn't be able to have even in 20, you wouldn't be able to have 20 very well managed partners. You might be able to have 5, and then the rest then filter down. But for you, you might want to grade them, have that A, B, C, or that tier 1, 2, 3 as a business. So if you're the salesperson, have a conversation with the team. You're running that business. What do your vendor alignments need to look like per quarter? You might rejig them. You might review them. You might decide where you're going to put your emphasis or your focus. And that might be based on margin. It might be based on incentives. You get to decide what that is. But if you've got the insight and the information, then you can make those decisions. And so when we know who their top partners are and then explicitly explain that we want to be part of that, or we want to be somebody that matters to them, then they're going to tell us how to do that. They're going to guide us in doing that. And that may be accreditations, it may be volume of deal registration, but show them that you are putting in the effort, and they will then see that and reward that through leads that are coming through, additional insights, reports, businesses that have been on their website. That was a great one that I certainly used to leverage. And so then when you've then got leads and opportunities and you're driving those through, it's going to become reciprocal. But number 4 is not starting off your relationship by asking what leads are they going to give to you. Now, I work with a lot of vendors and I work with a lot of distributors. And what tends to happen when I hear feedback in terms of what makes a great partner, and I certainly think that is a podcast for another time, from vendor relationships back to resellers, rather than resellers to vendors in this conversation. And the frustration of vendors is that the goal for a reseller program is that the vendor has a product, it has a go-to-market strategy, it has collateral and supporting content that you can utilize to go to market to grow your sales and your revenue. But they are required to build within this channel model opportunities and leads from you. And so if you go into that relationship asking what leads are they going to give to you, then we're missing the entire point when it comes to being a reseller. And so that comes, but in my opinion, you need to earn it. And so if you understand where you sit and what you need to do for them to take notice, then you're going to be more successful than if you just join up, do the accreditation, just wait for leads, because that is not how a reseller model works. It's not how a channel works. However, the more you bring, the more opportunities you will see, because these vendors are being given inbound leads through marketing. They are getting exposure. They're getting downloads of white papers, reports, lead magnets. And so when you give more to them, they are more likely to give back to you as well. Now, one of the things that I found extremely effective in when we had our vendors and our reps coming into town. Now, for those of you who don't know, I live in Perth in WA. And back then we saw a lower number of reps than what we see today. And so we're talking, about 10 years ago when I first moved to Australia. And then we saw vendors delivering reps from New South Wales, from over East. And what they would do is that they would fly in to WA for a couple of days. We would get them and we'd utilize their time. We'd get them into meetings and we'd identify opportunities and really work together. And we were doing this for a little while. And I then found out that we had one of these reps, or 2 reps. It was a rep and an SE. It's usually what you see, coming to town. And I knew they were only here for 2 days. And I had a whole list of opportunities. And so what I did was I grabbed the list of opportunities. I went wild, booked meetings for these 2 days back to back. And then I created a Word document just with a couple of sentences as an overview of the businesses that I was engaged with and those that I'd secured meetings with, and what I knew about them, what the opportunity was, what the conversation was going to be regarding, and then any of the collateral that I could find. And so what that meant was that it meant that I got the reps in town just for me for those 2 days. It meant they couldn't see any other partner. They couldn't have any of the meetings unless it was outside of working hours, and that's up to them. But it meant that I had them for 2 days, 2 days full of meetings. It meant that they were only going to be talking about me when they came back from their visit. And so therefore we would create a bigger name or a stronger name in that vendor, because we all know vendors are large. And so to be noticed and to be taken note of, we have to do things a little bit differently. And so by scheduling the meeting, providing the intel and information, it meant that I did their job for them. They were extremely impressed with the way that we'd secured those meetings and given that intel. It meant we got through from that. We were able to deal reg. We were able to schedule meeting number 2, demonstrations online, but we're able to build the relationship whilst the rep was in town. Now imagine doing that for your top 3 vendor connections. Imagine then building that out and knowing or allocating 2 days. Now you might be fortunate enough, and today we certainly are here in WA, of having reps on the ground full time, which is awesome. And so if that is you, you're not necessarily going to be as compelled to build out this 2-day cadence of meetings. And so you might want to do it where you're doing 2 or 3 meetings a week. It might be 2 or 3 meetings a month. It might be that you just say, can we have the day together? I'll schedule 5 meetings and we'll do it together. So there's different ways you can do this. It's always got to come back to working for you in line with what your goals and your targets are. But know this, that if you've got a rep that's in town, there's nobody else doing this. And so if you take this and run with it and then build and forge a stronger relationship, you're going to have more opportunities. You're going to have more deal registrations. You're going to generate more sales, more revenue, because you're making a concerted effort within a very specific focus time, which will get you noticed as well as see results. And so point number 6 of our 10 ways to build better relationships with our vendors is to connect with other people in the vendor organization. Now, you will more than likely be dealing with the rep. There might be a rep manager, there might be a regional manager, a state manager, a country manager. And it depends on how long you've been partnered with them for, will depend on how broad your exposure is in that organization. So go wild on LinkedIn, connect with people, talk about why you want to connect with them, talk about the relationship you're building with said person within that vendor. Think about any of the global connections. Now, a lot of these vendors have incredible events throughout the year. And what we tend to see is people coming from all over the world, from America, from Asia, from the UK, from Europe, coming to one place for this almighty conference, this almighty get together. And it'll be filled full of partners and resellers and integrators and distributors. And so if you connect with these global partner leaders, channel leaders, what you'll then find is you've now got this hit list of opportunities of people you want to connect with in person should the opportunity arise. Now, if it doesn't arise, but you've connected, you're now posting, because as we've said many times, there's no point in connecting if you're not going to post anything. So you're going to connect, you're going to post, and now those VP of channel, VP of partner sales are now going to start seeing who you are. Then if you then have a great month or a great quarter with that vendor, and then you stand out because you've organized 8 meetings in 2 days, or because you've hit the highest number of deal registrations, or you've also got the distributor singing your praises to the vendor, and vice versa. You start having this ripple effect. It's the same thing in outbound sales. The more we do consistently, we create this noise in the market that just can't help itself but ripple out. And so by growing your connections, by building awareness, will really help you in being noticed. And it's really important in a vendor for other people to know who you are, not just the rep. And that won't come from just shouting out and connecting. You actually have to show, you actually have to deliver these results in terms of identifying opportunities, getting meetings, getting deal registrations. But in the interim, let's start building those connections. Let's start sharing with those new connections who you are, what you stand for, and why you're so passionate about the product that's within that vendor or being delivered by that vendor. Now, attending webinars, attending events is extremely important. Also, get seen, be known, but you'll also learn. You'll hear from other partners. You'll hear what their challenges are, what their questions are. And so therefore you will continue to learn. It's something that I love about doing group coaching as well as one-on-one. And the group coaching gives you exposure to other people's problems, challenges, questions, or insights. And you may not have come across that challenge so far. It may not necessarily be something that you have been aware of or something that you even think is going to be something that will affect you. But let's say 3 months later, that problem arises. You've already been exposed to it. You've already been exposed to answers and outcomes. And the same things happens on these webinars and at these events is you get to learn from others, connect with others, because it's not just about competing in the market. Yeah, there's some competition for sure. But you never know where somebody else may get a lead and they can't fulfill it. You never know where somebody might be providing a really niche service that you can't deliver, but you've got a client that needs it and you don't want them to go to market because you want to deliver everything from you. You partner with them, you deliver it. So there's lots of pros to building out your network beyond the vendor and also within the industry. But by attending webinars and events, you'll learn more, you'll connect with more, you'll be seeing that you're showing up and taking initiative and also making the effort, which is extremely important. Now, point 8 is that you want to be clear on what you want in a deal and how you want that deal to be structured. So if you've gone to market, if you're working with an existing client or a new client or prospect, and you've identified an opportunity and you've got a great relationship, this great vendor and product that's going to deliver this great outcome, you've done it before, you've seen great results. Now, the way that you're going to structure that deal in terms of who else you're including, in terms of margin, in terms of what you need to hit to be able to hit your target, or what do they need to be able to hit their target. It's two-way street in everything. And so we want to really get clear on that. But if we don't explain what the requirement is or what your expectations are, it's very difficult for you to build a robust relationship, because you're going to feel that they didn't do what you wanted them to. You might not hit your internal target. It may not work for you. The vendor relationship may be, being built upon this deal or this opportunity. And so by being really clear, by being really explicit around how the deal needs to work for you, you'll know what they can do. You'll know what is possible, whether it be margin, whether it be the way it's structured, whether it be the way that it's invoiced. There's so many variables in every sale, as you'll know. And so by communicating that is really important. And that also ties into point 9, which is that if you're selling competing vendor products, which majority of resellers, integrators that I work with, it's very rare to see competing products in their vendor suite. Now, you may see a couple that there's a slight piece of crossover, or where they've been working with one vendor for a very long time and they've just started letting another vendor in just for a comparison to see how that sits within their alliances. And so there's a number of different ways, but usually we don't see a huge amount of crossover, maybe a little bit, and there may be multiple reasons for that. Now, if you are ever going to be doing that, I would recommend that you are very clear and upfront with that secondary or that alternative quote. Now, I remember we always worked very closely with one cybersecurity provider. We were then working with a second that had been trying to get through to us for a couple of years. We eventually let them in because we could see a really clear, definitive offering for different types of businesses, size organizations, and industries where we'd offer one over the other. And once we identified that within the organization, what it meant was that we could then go to market and really clearly offer 2 solutions without it being, do you want that one or that one? Now, there were cases where we would offer the 2 solutions, but we would explain which one to which vendor and where we stood. So, for example, if we say, look, I believe that this solution here, solution A, is going to be the best one for the customer, but we're going to provide them with an option of solution B because they've mentioned it in a meeting and somebody else has positioned it, and we don't want to lose that opportunity by not showcasing the 2. But then we're very clear as to where it sits and the fact that it's an option. It's not our recommended, and here's why. Now, again, depending on how you run your business, you may not want to be as upfront and honest as that. But in my experience, what I've found is that when you do that, it means then you're not going behind anybody's back. You're not setting an expectation and getting a quote, and they've now allocated that because you're doing a proposal delivery tomorrow, and they've forecasted that or they've put it into their pipeline for that quarter. I don't want any other salesperson to do that based on me providing 2 options. And so by being really clear, it also means that they know when to push and when to pull back, and when they're following up and when you're providing information back to them. And so we want to avoid that, do you want this one or this one? Or when we do, we want to be really clear as to why we're doing it and what the outcomes could potentially be. And so the final point in building better relationships, stronger relationships with our vendors, because they are as we know, one of the best ways to generate opportunities and generate sales, because they've got this incredible go-to-market, they've got this incredible database of information, is account mapping. Now, account mapping together is extremely powerful when done effectively, like anything. But if it's not done effectively, I'll give you some examples of how that could look. So number one, you say to the vendor, to the rep, could you share with me your white space accounts? And then I'll look through them, cross-reference them with our database, and then I'll go to market. What usually happens is that the rep will then send their white space accounts, which is 1,000 plus. They might be graded, they might be industry toggled within the Excel spreadsheet, but I can guarantee that list has gone everywhere. And what that means then is that you, along with everybody else, is going to go down that top 10 of leads, that top 10 of businesses that are listed there. You're going to get bored because there's no real strategic alignment. There's this list of 1,000, which feels like it's never ending. You don't have this really succinct, clear pathway to win business, to win meetings, to generate conversations together. And so what I recommend is then saying, look, give me a set number, give me 10, give me 20, and let's work on them together. And the reason why that's important is because if you go to market with this massive list that let's say 10 other integrators have in the state, in your country, in your suburb, in your patch, what then happens is that you go to market, you knock on their door, figuratively speaking, maybe not. You pick up the phone, you build connections on LinkedIn, you utilize email, you go to in-person events. And what's happening is you're like, hey, let's go have a meeting with this vendor. Let's look at how we're seeing great success with this vendor in industries or in businesses just like yours. And what then has the potential to happen is that you deliver that message. Somebody else goes to the same one and they deal reg it before you because they just got them on day 3 whilst they've been researching it. Or they find the rep or they find the vendor business page on LinkedIn or the website and they register their information to get a demonstration. Now that means then they've gone directly to the vendor and they'll then attribute, maybe connect to who their ideal reseller is. And what happens then, you miss out on the deal, even though you were the one that went to them first. And so we want a mutual agreement between you and the vendor that this is who you're going to go after. You're going to go to market. The goal is to get a meeting. You can bring them in or do the meeting on your own. But at the end of it, you feed back information and they update their CRM, their whitelist account. But they also know that if anybody comes to them directly, it's associated to you. And then at the end of that list, if you've not been able to see success or secure a meeting or identify an opportunity, you give it back to the vendor rep and they go out to market. Now, very simple, very, very simple. And all we've done is condense this massive whitelist Excel spreadsheet, which every vendor has, and we've condensed it right down to be really specific. Again, we know what success looks like. We can define a result and we work on it together. And so these are 10 quick ways to build better relationships with your vendors, to drive more opportunities, to drive more deal registrations, to drive more sales into your reseller integrator MSP business. And so I hope that they've given you some inspiration, some new ideas. And in the show notes, there will also be a link for this full video. I've done this as a recording for an hour-long video, more examples, more use cases, and there's templates associated. So click the link in the show notes and you can be taken to that, and where you get an hour-long video with me sharing all of my insights, tools, tips, and guides to building a stronger, more robust sales strategy with your vendors. Thank you for listening. It's been great to be in your ears for another week here on the Sell Like You podcast. Thank you for tuning into the Sell Like You podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and be sure to subscribe to never miss another one. A huge thank you to Vitality House for hosting today's recording, and I look forward to being back into your ears soon.